King of the Hill seems very simple. Get kills, capture the point, and win after 3 minutes, provided your team continues to control the point. Despite seeming simple at first glance, the underlying mechanics of this game mode are actually much more nuanced than they appear. I would wager that nearly everybody watching this video is making at least one of the mistakes that I'm going to discuss. There are two categories that common errors fall into, but before I can get to any specifics, I have to start with an in-depth explanation of how the control point works on King of the Hill, which I will be referring to as koth for short. Most players will already know the very basics, but I will give a quick recap for the uninitiated. Koth games are broken up into multiple rounds. In casual, the game will end after a team wins 2 rounds. Each round begins with both teams at their spawn, and the titular hill, which I will refer to as the point, is uncaptured. For the first few seconds of the round, the point is locked and cannot be captured, but for the remainder of the round, it stays unlocked. You capture the point by standing on it. The more friendly players that stand on the point, the faster the capture will go. However, at any point during the capture, an enemy player can stand on the point and contest, pausing the progress. If the team that was capturing the point no longer has any players standing on it, their cap progress will begin to regress. This regression is sped up if the opposing team has players on the point, and it will eventually start to capture in the other team's favor. Up until the point is first captured, both teams will have a 3-minute timer that is frozen. Upon being captured, the timer for the team that owns the point will begin to count down. If the point changes hands, the timer freezes and the other timer begins. Now that a team has the point, the other team is able to start capturing the point, but it will not stop the timer until the point has changed hands. Once the timer for either team reaches 0, the round is won in that team's favor unless there is cap time on the point for the other team. If the opposing team has players standing on the point, or if they have any capture time that has not fully regressed, the game will enter overtime. If the contesting team captures during the other team's overtime, the game will be lost if they lose the point. Anyways, up until now, the majority of you are probably not impressed. I think that most experienced players already knew all of this, except for the last tidbit, but again, I want to provide a thorough explanation to avoid any confusion. The following details are very important for understanding the rest of the video, and in my anecdotal experience, they are widely misunderstood or unknown entirely. The possession of the control point obviously affects the objective timer, but it also affects the duration of spawn timers. The team that owns the point has longer spawns than the team that does not. This typically means that the attacking team benefits from trades, and the defending team wants to avoid them most of the time. Not only does possession of the point affect the duration of spawn times at the moment of the player dying, but it can also change the duration of existing spawn timers if the point changes possessions. For example, if you have the point and you die defending it, your spawn timer will get shortened when the other team captures the point. Conversely, if you die pushing the point and your team captures when you are still spawning, your spawn timer will get extended. This results in a dynamic where, once the defending team realizes they are guaranteed to lose the point for whatever reason, they change from attempting to value their life and avoid trades into getting aggressive to try and guarantee kills to put the attacking team into a difficult spot. This is known as point sacking, and the idea is that you are sacrificing your KD to squeeze out as much objective time as possible by abusing the lesser known spawn timer mechanics. If you are able to successfully kill a number of attacking players, they are forced to either cap immediately and delay their spawners while simultaneously pushing up the respawns of the team that just sacked, making a refight easier for the attacking team. Alternatively, they can delay their capture until their players respawn, and then finally capture the point. This second option is usually the better play, although it depends. If 9 out of the 12 of your team is currently on a respawn timer, then capturing the point and delaying them all is a huge mistake and will almost certainly lead to your team losing the point in a short period of time. However, if your clock is at 0 seconds, then it is worth it to capture and win the round. Now, on some maps, there are other mechanics to keep in mind, such as the door that unlocks when you don't have the point on Demolition or the rotating point on Rotunda. However, these mechanics are rare, and what I went over is enough for the majority of koth maps. Now that you understand how the control point directly impacts both the objective as well as spawn timers, let me get into common mistakes I see on koth. The first and most common mistake I see players making is straight up ignoring the point. Now, obviously getting kills is important in pretty much any game mode, but ideally you should be getting kills when you control the point, since those kills will help you complete the objective. On most mid-fights, I will ignore the point even after it is unlocked to try and get kills, since the other team's clock isn't ticking down, and because it is typically advisable to ensure a safe capture of the point by pushing the other team away from the objective or outright killing them. Ignoring the point becomes a problem if you are chasing kills in the other team's backline as the other team is burning objective time, especially if your team is fighting players who are contesting the point. However, there is a balance to be struck here. If you only take fights to push up onto the point and you stop there, you are giving the other team room to breathe on their side of the map. This allows for the defense to set up a staging area to point sack in as you are vulnerable on the point, and if you aren't expecting it, you may straight up lose the ability to cap. This balancing act of managing the objective versus chasing for frags is one of the reasons why Koth is my personal favorite game mode. On the flip side, overfocusing the point is also another mistake I see. Like I just said, giving the other team too much space can be a recipe for disaster, and I will be talking more about that in a bit, but there are other drawbacks. A similar error is capturing the point and delaying a large number of spawns on your team. If you are only focused on capturing the point, you may be ignoring how many players your team has alive and accidentally delay a huge group of spawners. This typically leads to losing the point very quickly since the opposing team will have an easy time winning the point back if they are paying attention. Deciding exactly when to delay the capture for your spawns and when to capture immediately isn't an exact science, but if your team has more than 4 or 5 players dead, it is probably worth delaying your capture until after they spawn. The final mistake I see players make in this category is forgetting to point sack. This is the error that can be the hardest to fix because dying to stop the point seems pretty unintuitive to people who play a lot of payload or attack defend, but if done correctly, point sacks can win rounds. As I stated previously, a successful point sack puts the attacking team into a difficult situation. Cap now and delay their players who just died, or delay capturing for a few seconds, thus losing out on 10 to 15 seconds of cap time and giving the other team even more time. Ironically, the latter is usually a better option, but many casual players are not aware of the dangers of delaying their spawns and will cap right away, giving the other team an opportunity for an easy refight. Now, there are some situations where it is not in your best interest to point sack, however, most of the time I think it is worth it. Exceptions are if you are playing medic for obvious reasons, if you are playing engineer and you need to build or upgrade your buildings, or if you are not healthy enough to have a significant chance of doing anything useful on any class. Classes like sniper can also participate, although it is not usually worth it for a sniper to actually try and contest the point, but instead peek it from far away. Scouts, heavies, and pyros can try and touch the point to stop the cap, but they can also just kill the players capping during the point sack. Demos and soldiers can bomb the cappers, or they can bomb behind to set up a crossfire. Depending on the situation, you can also simply spam projectiles at the point. Of course, Spy can collapse from any angle, really. The common theme here is collapsing onto the capping players and getting as many kills as possible. Dying in the process isn't necessary, but since your spawns will get moved forward when they cap, it's not a huge deal. If you are going to lose the point anyways, you should make it as painful as possible for the attackers. Turn their victory Pyrrhic. So, other than paying too much or too little attention to the point, forgetting to avoid delaying your spawns, and point sacking when necessary, what other Koth mistakes are there? Map control, also referred to as room or space, wins games. Map control is exactly what it sounds like, controlling parts of the map. This isn't to be confused with possessing the capture point, because simply having the point does not prevent the other team from taking it from you. Map control also does not care about whose side of the map the area in question is on. Just because you are at your spawn doesn't mean that your team is actually controlling that area. I'm sure everybody watching this has been spawn camped before, which is a perfect example of this. In order to win games, you need to complete the objective, and in order to complete the objective, you need to control areas of the map for sustained periods of time. In the case of King of the Hill, that means controlling the area around the capture point. In my video about payload mistakes, I talked about how if you are being given space, then you should take it. This space usually comes in the form of kills, although sometimes the other team's positioning is subpar. Ideally, instead of playing behind the point and shooting anybody who tries to stand on it, you will be playing on or in front of the point and shooting anybody who tries to walk through the choke points that lead to the point. Holding chokes is a fundamental part of TF2 positioning, and if most of your team can get aggressive, it is almost always better than sitting behind the point waiting for the other team to take all the room you are giving them. Using Viaduct as an example, it seems like so many teams are drawn to the corner on concrete like moths to a flame. This is a terrible spot for an entire team to hold for a number of reasons. Firstly, you don't contest any of the entrances to the point, where your opponents would be the most vulnerable due to being on low ground and in the choke point. Secondly, you are unable to pressure any of the major sightlines and are pinned down by any snipers posted up on Cliff or China. Instead of hiding in a corner on your own concrete, you can try playing on the other team's concrete and fighting players who walk in the grass, or you can try getting forward on the other team's cliff. Now, where exactly you should be positioning depends a lot on the class you are playing, as well as how the rest of your team is playing. You do need to be smart with your aggression, since there is a difference between holding space and feeding. However, in my experience, it is more effective to take the fight to the other team, and it is also a lot more fun. I should also mention that if your whole team decides to hold very forward, if things go south, you can simply back up to a more typical passive hold that you see most teams doing. If you lose players during the forward hold but manage to trade out some attacking players, you may be able to back up and set up for a point sack or even a refight if you have a teleporter up. Speaking of teleporters, I find that they are extremely underrated in general, but especially on King of the Hill. Unlike on many other game modes that have a more dynamic objective, the point remains the same on Koth. This means that an engineer can pretty much set it and forget it after upgrading his tele to level 3, assuming the other team ignores the teleporter. While each teleport will get less value on Koth because the maps are smaller overall, don't underestimate the value of a level 3 tele. I've played Viaduct games where I get upwards of 70 teleports. Despite being one of the smallest maps in the game, each teleport will shave off roughly 3 to 5 seconds of your rollout. Also, a teleporter will allow soldiers and demos to preserve their crit heals, resulting in a much healthier team in the long run. This adds up over the course of a round. If you are playing Spy on my team, please, for the love of God, go to the other team's spawn and kill the teleporter entrance. Don't let the other team's engineers farm 75 teleports in one game. Anyways, that does it for this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. Thank you for watching. He's piped twice. Oh, he's getting arrowed. Alright, pipe sniper. Engineer behind us at our spawn. Dude, I